Hello, welcome to this video, part 2 of the 88 video that I started previously. And I'm just going to roll right into it. So my intention is the highest levels of love, light, union, and communion, unity, consciousness, benevolence for all. I'm just going to go into a little flow. A little light language and just some sharing of these expressions. Some of this is meant to be felt, not necessarily understood on a linear basis. Kuara ashte ne kiara. Di kiara o te har in the kiara or. Di shtarahar o kun na kiara aneti kar amakor enete. Di kora aneti shte kor amaha ne ki or aneti dar or inishte kor maora hen na kora. Kir ener or ekishti mako ene kiawa hat ea. Kiawa ko enau kunini au kuni steu hak aine makoa. Now he bakunet ishte kumkoa wahenet ea hak ue titia kuniste waho okuena. No aha te mokoste no awa ko ene umokoe te ste wana te kima niku ste o ko ene ko hae te nakia o ste kuana ma ek ene kiak ene kiki wa ha an ak ene kiki ne awa ek e tititi kiki nan te wa e akwaena Kine koe awe ya mo kone ti ki wai kine ka te yana. Ne koe poe te koe ne ki te ue te ne. Ne a te ki woe wane ne ke te wane te. Ne kunne titi da wae au mokoe ne ti steo han kini kua wa hai te stao koe na koe amo e ao o e aste au koe po koitir ai kukoe he ne te wa kuiste Di ora amokua ste bokura ne te kiar anka era hamakoa na te awa na ke ne awa hene te a. Ne o mo ne ke au ne ke ne ana te wa mokua na. Ne na mo na kiti te au mo na kai te di uni ste awa na ke awa ene. Ne ki awa te tena. And there's a vast array of languages and qualities that come with these sounds and frequencies that we are sharing and expressing through this field of fluidity that we all share and express within. As we share in these different language and tones and language components and tones that intermingle and come together in a fluid interconnection, we spin different frequencies and geometries into the patterns in which we express within. This changes our vibration, this changes our own frequency as we allow ourselves to feel into the frequency of the communication and the linguistic application that is applicable to the entire subset in which we are existing within. We speak and reference this having to do with geometric references, if you will. Different soundometries, if you will, soundologies, sound geometries that come together in a commingling of linguistic applications. We seek to express these different ways of applying these frequencies so that we can all recognize that within each of us are different layers and subsets of our own applied geometry, if you will. We do not always have the ability to communicate in certain patterns, for these patterns are harder to harness from a human expression from one perspective. From another perspective, they are the easiest patterns for a human to express if they knew how to express them. And yet we all know within the deeper knowing, the deeper truth of how to express these harmonics, these human harmonics that are all wrapped up within our own packaging system, if you will. For we are all holding, I'm hearing packet providers, we are all holding packets of frequencies of harmonics that we provide for each other, yet is also provided for us, for we are the providers of the sound, of the geometries that are interlacing and commingling in this reactivity subset. Play on words. We understand that some of these forms of languages that we are speaking right now, some of the forms and containers that these languages are holding, some of the patterns and sounds and frequencies that we are expressing in English from one perspective, do not necessarily compute, if you will. Some of them are not necessarily understandable to the common the common language that many are used to applying, that many are used to playing within. Many are using to apply their own frequencies into their reality. And many of us are not used to using these applications, although they are readily available to us. So we share how we play and how we access these different harmonic frequencies so that others may play, if they should choose to, within these different subsets as well. They do not have to be spoken, if you will. They do not have to be shared. They can be internalized and recognized from one perspective and utilized from that wave length, from that consistency that then allows the activation, the chemical recognition, the recognition, the enhanced vision, if you will, of the imagination and other memories that are then activated within the cellular vibrancy of the body. I'm hearing of the bottle. We allow these energies to come through in a pattern of harmonics that allows others to remember, that allows others to harmonize with these components, that then allow for a cellular exchange on a deeper vocabulary subset, harmonizer, frequency, layer, if you will. We also play with the words and layer them in certain sentences and combinations of access points, if you will, that allow those that are listening or reading later to tune into the different nodes and portals that are then accessible from, I'm being shown like sizable, like when you download a zip file into a smaller size, and then it can be unpacked later, and I'm hearing because it's compacted into a compression chamber that then once triggered or activated within the knowingness within the molecular structure from one perspective, then allows that to open. And we then begin to harness the frequencies or the spin subsets that are laid out in the geometric equation, in the geometric display. I'm hearing conversation, display conversation, that allows us to then, I I just went into 5 different places. So, many are accessing this now, for there is a sound that you have been playing with, perhaps within your own field of awareness. Perhaps this sound is merely just that, for communication is not necessarily spoken word in a language geometric addition, mathematical, additional to the sound components. For communication can come through in many forms or non-forms in formation. So if you are harnessing this particular sound, whether it be a high pitch or a low pitch, some of these sounds help to vibrate the bones, if you will, in the inner ears, in the vocal columns, in the vocal cords, in the vocal voluminization that is tapping into the library of existence. For how you choose to communicate with this vast quantum energy exchange of information is up to you. This may be done through listening, through singing, through sound compilations, through vibration. I'm seeing, what is it, cymatics, S-I-N-E, matics. It can also be done through color, movement, and there are other ways of combining all of this that then enhances the way that this information is processed, if you will, expressed, if you will, understood, if you will. But we are asking and inviting one another to take the first step in organizing this, and this begins with recognizing this. And as I'm saying organizing, I'm just seeing all kinds of pictures the entire time as I'm talking, you guys, just so you know. So I'm seeing like an organ that you play on a keyboard. I'm seeing pipes that are connected to the organ, and that's our pipes here. I'm seeing the central channel of communication to source, and I'm seeing the inner organs of the body, how the larynx, the voice cords, the voice box, the heart, even the liver, that just came up. Like, I'm seeing how it's all kind of harmonizing and communicating with each other in order to then assist us in this ascension period or phase of our development, if you will. This allows us to then process certain understandings, and I'm hearing equivalencies and diagnostics. Guys, when I'm just recording this and I'm not on camera, then I know that I'm going to post, it's easier because I'm not trying to make sense of it. But I know that this is just kind of one of those really out there transmissions. So I'm trying to kind of make it a little bit more easily understood by just kind of breaking in and breaking it up a little bit. Think of this as a way to warm up the body from one perspective. Sorry, there was just a massive surge of energy and ringing in my ears, so I had to sit with that for a moment. We interlace many of these words with a vocabulary order, if you will. A certain geometric alignment then occurs within the mapping system that we are all connected into. And the ways in which we activate, I'm hearing subsidiaries of the macro into the micro and vice versa, allows us to communicate and harness certain nodes of information, if you will, equivalencies to higher frequencies from one perspective, that allows us to reunify from a higher field of expression. For then we feel into our accessible components. We are able to then access a deeper set of components. We then come into a higher circumference, a broader bandwidth, if you will, and those are interchangeable. A higher bandwidth, a larger circumference, that allows us to integrate and access with less interference. It allows us to come into a deeper and more expansive frame of reference. It allows us to reference certain variations of communication in such a way that we can then filter and move through that which has been infiltrated. Play on words also to all of this. We move through this then undetected, if you will. And we understand that this seems very coded in its expression, but in reality, we are always coding. We are always creating codes, and we are always doing this so that we can create from a broader and more vast, communicative, dialectric, dial up, dial in, violin, and it allows us to then move through our higher quartet or string instrument, if you will, cutting the strings or the chords that are out of alignment with our true tune. Our true tune, which is tuning to the truth of who we are, and tuning out those lesser subsets or vocabularies, if you will, that have been let us just say, frequently distractions before, that have slowed down the flow from one perspective. So we give this presentation of wordplay, wordology, so that others can use certain words in their own linguistic play and mapping system to then tune into their own realities and variations. Oh, so many words just came through. Subatomic, astral, astrological, astrology, geology, quantumifications. All of these are meant to be played with, for we are not set within this staunch set of categorically difficult words and forms and ways of communication. For we have noticed, have you not noticed, how complicated many of the systems have been set up, many of the complications that have been set up to purposefully distort the simplification of how we can communicate on a quantum level, and we have then created in our reality these distortions. We are beginning to access the more simplistic layers of truth, that the true harmonious interaction with Source and Earth and our galactic helpers and friends from one perspective, and elemental equations that are part of us, have always been, yet have been, I'm seeing a lot like they were hidden, they were kind of tossed aside. And guys, I'm being guided just to slightly talk about this. I'm seeing like our laws, for example, right? Like reading that language, you have to go to school sometimes to understand how to use the lingo, right? You speak, if you're a mathematician, you speak in mathematical equations. If you're a scientist, you might use some of those terms, but then you have to use other terms that go along with it. And many of us aren't necessarily, it's not that we're not capable of speaking in those languages, but those languages haven't been easily accessible for everybody. Like, not everybody understood, myself included. I don't speak mathematical language, yet sound is a mathematical language because everything is mathematical, right? And what I'm being guided to just express is that if we can start to harness and tap into how to communicate with these subsets of information in our own playfulness, we can then begin to access and divinate from those deeper patterns and memories. And then that becomes more accessible for all, for the whole, for all of us. Meaning you don't have to work for, some huge scientific base in order to understand what it is they're speaking about. Because we get it on a cellular, keep hearing subatomic scale. Like it's within us. Because it's how the universe communicates. But what we've done is we've really overcomplicated the simplicity of just this inner child playfulness. And then this allows us to direct our attention and our intentions more inward. And then we get this direct reflection of that reflecting back to us on our outer world, what's going on from our inner world and what we're accessing, which then opens the portals. I'm still in flow. It then opens our portals of potential. Our higher potential is then more easily accessed, and we don't feel completely lost. I mean, we can still sometimes I do. But this information that streams in, it then is like it pings off of us and we go, oh, well, that's what that's all about. Boom. And we are then able to not just intellectually, not just intelligently, well, I'm being guided to kind of separate those words a little bit. We do then intelligently then unpack those codes and that information that is held within the codons, that is held within the string quartets, that is held within the proteins, the DNA, and the quantum accessibility to, I'm hearing like string theory, all of these other realities. Some of us want to access Lemuria, for example. Well, it's here, it's in us. So tuning into different things can bring our awareness into that. But I'm being guided to come back to that because many people are expecting Lemuria, I'm just using that as one example, to sound a certain way, to look a certain way, to feel a certain way. But Lemuria isn't just one thing. It isn't just one time. It isn't just one reality. Because just like our reality isn't that either, neither were any of these other timelines. Does that make sense? And I know I'm kind of going off into a tangent here, but I'm essentially sharing light language from other places, from other dimensions, from other realities here on Earth, but also from Andromeda, from Sirius, but also lost civilizations that are literally embedded within the architecture of the Earth. So that's coming up through all of us if we choose to connect with it in that way, because many of us have been or will be in the future accessing these other places and spaces. So we do that, but we utilize all of that to create our reality now, not to recreate the past, although we can do that as well. It's a whole other video, which that's something I'd have to stay in flow about, but we're also then rippling out, right? But the biggest and changing the future, or changing all of it. But the biggest message is our communication has to expand with our expansion, with our way of expressing. And the more we really have fun with this, I'm hearing the more proactive we become. And there will be those that do not understand the way that we equate these equations, or how we differentiate these different forms of communications and then allow them to flow through the archaeology of our own inner diversity, of our own inner network, if you will. And that is okay, because what I'm seeing is it helps to combine the logical and the creative. So make the sounds, make the adjustments that our composition is inviting us to make. Feel into, I'm hearing the wave span, play on words. What is a wave, right? It's a charge, the charge, and particles are just this charge moving through all things. Feel into this new accessibility that has basically been dropped into our laps, play on words. It assists us in moving through our old lapses of judgment, our old time lapses, if you will. It allows us to work from a broader lens. It allows us to broaden our horizons. It allows us to speak more fluently through and from our deeper channel, meaning our deeper resonance with our higher. I'm being guided to get rid of the word hierarchy and recognize that we are the key to the higher arcing, which is energetic, which is electrical. It allows us then to process all that we have been holding tightly onto for whatever reason. I could go into so many different layers there. It allows us to process that which we have been holding on to in such a way that it adds variation to our structure. It adds variation to who we identify as part of our structure and who we identify with. And I'm seeing us like working together. And I'm seeing like the scientific community working with some of the woo-woo community that was so, before it was like shun on. For this coming together in recognition, play on words, I'm just seeing turning on the ignition, turning on the igniting switch, switching from one admission into another, like, oh, well, maybe they do have something we can utilize. I'm seeing admitting that not everybody knew everything. Just doing that then helps all of us to access a higher potentiality, a higher field in the sea of potentiality, a higher potential reality that is potentially real now, that gives us more clarity and offers us a new unification with one another. And this is also giving us the recognizing that our old system has already been tuned out, if you will, for we have tuned up, and we are integrating in tune into the tune of least resistance. So I'm going to end on that note. I could just keep going on and on and on. This is one of those days. But I have things I have to do in 3D reality, or whatever layer we want to label it as. And this is a perfect example. Let us say one more thing. Let us recognize that this is a constant state of being. It is not as if we turn off the key and then separate ourselves from this more spacious reality. Yet we can recognize as we move throughout our day the key components that are showing up for us to play within. I'm being guided to play with that. The key core moments. For in these moment-to-moment acknowledgements, we recognize that we are accessing more knowing and more knowledge and acknowledgeability, then enhances and increases our ability to stay connected to the resonance and this deeper, more vivid expression in all that we interact with and in all actions that we then share and express with the wherewithal through all things in all ways, and so on and so forth. So, I'm running out of room. In love and light, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Getting back into our central channel is key right now. Meditation, movement, breath work, and unplugging at least for when we know we need to, we feel it, and not ignoring that, that information coming in and just allowing that to create a spaciousness within. In love and light. Namaste.